Clare FM's In the Garden with Clonroad Garden Centre, Clonroad Business Park, in the heart of Ennis. Whether you're a seasoned gardener or just starting out, our friendly staff are here to help your garden grow. Open 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday.
And that intro means it is time to bid a good morning to Judy Beck, the General Manager at the Clonroad Garden Centre. Judy, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan, and a very happy birthday to your daughter, Grace. Hope she has a great day.
Thank you very much. I saw her opening loads of presents before I left this morning. She's having a great day. If anyone has a message for you, Judy, of course, or a question, send them into 086 1800 964. But before we get to the listeners' questions, there is plenty for us to discuss, including this week's topic, Judy, and you've gone for a classic Irish topic, the humble spud.
Absolutely, and we're so happy that this week we're expecting our humble spuds into stock, and this kind of signals the start of a new gardening year for us when our new potato seed comes into stock. It feels like spring is on the way, and it's always a favourite with us this week when they arrive from our suppliers. So what we call it seed potato is what the new potato stock is. And it's not really a seed at all. It actually looks like a potato for all intents and purposes. So this little bag of potatoes comes in, and it's almost what you would buy in the shop. But there is a big difference between the seed potato that you use for growing potatoes and the potatoes that you would buy for eating. The main difference is that all these potatoes are the premium potatoes from last year's crop. They're all certified as virus-free, which means that you're not bringing any viruses into your garden. And also you're going to get a much better crop. I mean, some people have tried and do try, they have an old bag of potatoes under the sink, and sometimes, sure, I'll throw them into the ground and see if they grow. But usually you get a very poor crop if you do that. And also you could be introducing virus into your garden. Okay. So much better idea to buy the bag of potatoes.
Okay, so it's good to have advice this morning on growing potatoes. And with seed potatoes, Judy, they're categorised into three categories?
That's right. So first earlies, second earlies and main crop potatoes. And first earlies is probably the one that we all know, the first potatoes of the season. When you get that new Irish potato, there's nothing like tasting it after eating the hard coated potatoes from the winter when they have that tough skin on them. And then you go into these brand new potatoes where you can basically just wash the dirt off them and eat them straight, boil them up and eat them with a little bit of butter and salt. There's absolutely nothing like it. And they're so easy to grow. And even in the smallest garden, you can even grow a few of your own potatoes on your balcony. So highly recommend, if you've never tried growing them, give it a go and see how you get on. It is a hugely popular thing to do, and we sell a huge amount of seed potato. It's not just the older people that grow them. It's actually now a lot of schools are actually growing potatoes, and the kids are actually bringing their parents in now to buy seed potato because they want to try a few at home. So it's definitely something for everybody. The first earlies is, as I was saying, it's the ones that the first new potatoes of the season, and the particular varieties would be Sharks Express would be one, Home Guard would be another. They'd be the two favourites that we would sell. There are a good few other varieties, but those would be the best known. Second earlies, British Queens or Queens. Most people have heard of those. They're a second early potato. And the difference between a first early and second early is basically how long they take to harvest. For the first earlies, you're talking about 3 months or about 12 weeks. And then for the second earlies, about 16 weeks. So an extra month of growing till they're ready for harvest. Then the main crop are the ones that store. They're the ones that you can keep and that will store well for the winter. And you might know the Rooster would be a main crop, Record, Golden Wonder, Kerr's Pink. They're all ones that you see commonly available in the shops. And ones that you can grow. And also with the main crop potatoes, you get the blight free. And of course, we all know what blight is in this country. Blight is, of course, what caused the potato famine. And we still get potato blight. It's still around, but now they have there's new varieties that are very much resistant to blight. And an Irish variety that'd be resistant to blight would be Cara, and one the most resistant to blight would be Sarpomira. So that prevents blight, and of course, once you get blight in your potatoes, it's so disappointing.
Yeah, for sure. And as you just mentioned there, Judy, there are quite a number of blight-resistant potatoes nowadays. But even aside from that, are there still treatments or sprays or things like that that can be used to prevent potatoes from getting blight? Or, is it preferable to try and avoid sprays where possible?
Yeah, it is much preferable not to. And I suppose copper sulfate would have been the traditional spray, but that's been phased out now because the copper is building up in the soil. So they're really going for trying to phase out all these nasty chemicals out of production, and there's very little available now to the home grower to prevent to spray for blight. The main treatment at the moment would be if you haven't sown a blight resistant potato, as soon as you notice blight on the potatoes, you cut down the stalks and get rid of the stems, and hopefully if you can do that before it reaches the actual tuber underground, then you can prevent the blight going into the potato and they're still safe to eat. So that is really the main remedy are available now to home growers, is actually to cut the stalks down before the blight gets into.
So, Judy, when it comes to growing potatoes, it's of course you're coming up to mid-January. Is it too early to be starting to grow your potatoes, or can you prepare? When is the ideal time?
So if you're growing your potatoes outside, which most people would be doing, the traditional time to put your potatoes in the ground is St. Patrick's Day. But there's no point really, if the conditions are not right, if it's been a very wet winter, a wet early spring, and your ground is very wet, there's no point in putting them in the ground in St. Patrick's Day. You're better off to wait until maybe the middle of April to put them in and to see if the ground conditions are right there. That's one of the main mistakes people do, is putting them in just being so eager to get them in the ground and putting them in that little bit too early. If you put them in a bit later, it's going to catch up. You're not going to lose out. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a polytunnel or a glass house, you can start them much earlier than that. And if you buy them in January, the main thing that you do first is for your first and second earlies is to what we call chitting. Chit them on the windowsill. And basically that's an old word for sprouting. So every potato has a few eyes on it, and those eyes grow up into sprouts, and that's where your harvest is eventually going to come from. So you put you put your potatoes into egg boxes, put them on a windowsill, like if you have a spare bedroom. Line up your egg boxes, put your potato seed into them, and those little eyes are going to grow into sprouts. And the reason that you do that is that you're going to get a head start on your season. So you start off by chitting, you leave them there for a month, and then put them into the polytunnel. So if you start them mid to late January, you're putting them into the polytunnel at the end of February. So you're getting that little bit of a head start than if you're growing them outside. Now, if you are going to grow them outside, you wouldn't start chitting them until mid-February to late February. And that gives them a good month before you would sow them out into your garden.
Okay.
But as I say, don't do it too early, because we do get very wet ground here, and of course raised beds helps that. It helps the soil to drain away. And another tip as well is to cover your beds with black plastic, and that helps the ground to dry out. And it also, any bit of sun you get, it helps the soil to heat up. So that means you can put the potatoes in a little bit earlier. And experienced gardeners would often cover their beds with black plastic in order for that to happen.
Okay, before we get to the jobs for the week, any other tips in relation to growing potatoes?
Yeah, well, I was saying earlier that if you don't have a big garden, you don't have vegetable beds, you can still grow potatoes. And you can grow potatoes in anything, really. You can grow them in buckets, bins, even in a compost bag. You can put 3 potatoes into a compost bag and you'll still get a harvest. The main thing to do is to make sure whatever you're growing in, that they have a drainage holes, because if you put your potatoes into a bag of compost or into a bucket and you leave it out and we get that heavy rain, the soil's just going to be absolutely soaked. So you need to have drainage holes in the bag. And then you can basically grow potatoes in anything. All you need a richish ground. So you can put some well-rotted manure into your beds or add a bit of manure into the bucket with the compost. And that just increases the harvest and makes sure that you just get slightly bigger potatoes. Just to remember, potatoes don't like frost. We can get frost even right up to May. And the way that you prevent your potatoes getting burnt by the frost is when you put them in the ground and you see the shoots coming up. What you do is we call it earthing up. So you cover those shoots with soil and you wait for the stalks then to grow up a little bit more through that soil, and then you can keep earthing them up until the risk of frost is gone. That increases the amount of soil on the bed, so you get a bigger crop, but the main thing is that it prevents the tips getting burnt by the frost.
Okay, some brilliant tips there.
Yeah.
Any other ones, Judy?
They hate drought. So if you have them in the tunnel, make sure that they're well watered. Or if we've got a really dry May, June, sometimes we do, the odd time, make sure that the soil doesn't dry out, because if the soil gets too dry, you're going to get a very poor harvest. So make sure they don't have a lack of water. And then how do you know when to harvest them? Well, the potato stalk will flower. And then you can have a root around underground. Just check out one and see underneath, have you got enough of a harvest under there? Are the potatoes big enough? If they're not, just leave them a couple of weeks longer and check again. So just don't harvest them too early. If they're smaller, than golf balls, there's absolutely no point. Just wait till at least that they're, bigger than a golf ball, basically, or bigger than an egg before you harvest them.
Okay, before we get to the listeners' questions, and just a reminder, it is 086 1800 964. If you have a gardening question for Judy, have you any tasks drawn up for them for the week ahead?
Well, a few suggestions. I was going to organising your shed. Good time to start doing it now. It's the one job I have on my own to-do list. Get the shed cleared out from the winter, see what I've left over, see if I've got tomato food, see if I've got organic weed killer, see what's in there. And so I don't have to be overbuying and getting a second thing of everything this year. Organise it up, get my tools sorted out, get them organised, get the lawnmower ready to go, and just get ready for spring. Also, bare root, it's still bare root season. So if you need bare root hedging, make sure you order it now and get that in, because bare root needs to be in the ground, preferably by the end of February or at the latest St. Patrick's Day. And wisteria. If you have a wisteria climber, now is the time to prune it. So January, February is good. Should be giving it your second prune. Your first prune for wisteria is in July and August, and your second prune, your main prune, is January, February. So good time now is to prune your wisteria.
Okay, brilliant stuff. And we now have lots of listeners' questions, so let's get to those. The first one for you, Judy, is somebody asking, when will cabbage plants be available for sale?
So still a little bit early. Normally, I think last year they came in around the last week in February. Can be March, depends on the weather again. So the nurseries that grow tons of cabbage plants and cauliflower plants, broccoli plants, very, very popular for people to buy rather than growing from seed. But normally around the end of February, we should have them in. Keep an eye on our Facebook page, because we will definitely put them up and let people know they're available then.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Tommy has sent us a question for you as well, 086 1800 964. He says, I'm gardening on heavy glazed soil in the Midlands. Every winter my borders become a swamp and I'm losing shrubs to root rot. Aside from building raised beds, which native plants can actually survive having wet feet for 3 months of the year?
Well, nice to hear we have listeners in the Midlands.
We're spreading our listenership out.
That's great. And hi, Tommy. So you have a heavy clay soil and you want plants that will grow well in wet ground. So yeah, it's there are plants for sure that will grow in wet ground, but of course your options are going to be much more limited than if you had well-drained soil. Willow, of course, is a really good one if you want to put in a tree that grows well in wet ground. Hostas, beautiful hostas, they enjoy a bit of wet soil. And you can get lots of different types of hostas. The thing about hostas is that they die away in the winter, so you don't have anything left. Hydrangeas are they enjoy a damp soil. Now, I wouldn't want to be soil that puddles. There's wet ground and there's soil that puddles, and puddling soil is you're much more limited. So at least if the ground is heavy clay, you would be fine. The hydrangeas would really like that soil. The other one is the lily, the white lily. The traditional one that they have at Easter. Very hard to say the name actually in Latin, Zansedetia. But if the white lily grows really well, it actually grows like even where you have a pond and really wet soil by the pond or by rivers, you'll often see them growing, these beautiful big white flowers. And they actually don't grow in colder countries than Ireland. They actually do really well here because of our temperate climate. And they're quite exotic looking. But that would be another one. Another one would be dogwood. Dogwood quite likes a damp soil, and it'll do quite well. So I hope those tips help Tommy anyway with things. But of course, draining the soil is probably the best thing he can do.
I've no doubt. Your advice is top notch, Judy. So I'm sure Tommy will get great use out of it. From the Midlands, though, as we spread our audience out across the country, back to Clare and to the west of the county. Sarah is listening to the show this morning, and Judy, she needs help from you in dealing with moss. She says she has lots of it because of the shade and the constant drizzle. She's wondering, is it worth fighting with sulphate of iron every year, or is there a low maintenance clover or wildflower alternative?
So yeah, moss is, I actually love moss because it's, and even in Japan they have gardens just for moss. But it's something that we have so much of in this country that most people don't appreciate it, especially when it's on the lawn, because it does make the lawn difficult to cut. So sulphate of iron is something you have to put down every year, and it will get rid of the moss for that year, but it turns black. So when you put down the sulphate of iron, what it does is actually killing the moss, but then your lawn looks really black. So you either have to wait for that blackness to die off and the moss to die off, or you have to rake it out, which is quite a lot of work. So recently there is, probably Sarah might have heard of it. In the last few years, there's a new product out. It's based on bacteria. So it's totally natural. So it's not a harsh chemical that you have to keep the pets and the kids off the lawn. It's a totally natural product that you spread on the lawn. One brand name would be Mobacter, but there's lots of other generic ones available now. So you spread out this bacteria, and what it does is it dissolves the moss. And as it dissolves the moss then actually feeds the lawn. So a really nice product, totally natural, no harsh chemicals, doesn't turn the moss black. And what it does is it just lies dormant. It has to be a certain temperature for it to work. So it lies dormant on the soil until the temperatures come up. And when it's the right temperature, then it starts working and it starts eating away at the moss. And actually, I've used it myself for probably the last 3 to 4 years, and last year was the first year that I didn't have any moss on the lawn. So if you constantly use it, you will find that even in this damp climate where we don't get a lot of sun, the moss will become less and less as the years go on. Okay. So just, really nice product, and if you go into any garden centre, they should have it.
Okay, Anna says she's trying to grow Mediterranean crops like tomatoes and peppers, even in a south-facing spot, though. She says they just won't ripen. Without a polytunnel, she's wondering, is it even possible to get a decent harvest, or is she stuck with potatoes and kale? Anna, potatoes and kale are lovely, but yeah, tomatoes and peppers would be nice as well. Any solutions for her, Judy?
Yeah, and we're going to actually be covering tomatoes and peppers in the next few weeks on how to grow them. But the one tip I would give her is not to bother growing the larger tomatoes. So only grow cherry tomatoes. That's her best chance to get them ripened. and keep them in, start growing them in the house on the windowsill and keep them in there until probably the end of May, and put them outside in June, put them up against the south facing wall, which she is doing, but only try with the cherry tomatoes. It is worth trying, and people do it successfully, but really, unless you have a really good summer, there's no point in it, like the standard normal tomatoes or the big beefsteak tomatoes. They're going to stay green. You're going to end up having to make green tomato chutney. So if you want nice red tomatoes, I would suggest only growing the small little cherry ones. That's our best chance.
Okay, and best of luck with that, Anna. And final question from a listener who is worried about their Riccartoni fuchsia hedge. They say the tips of the new growth are looking all knobbly and distorted, almost like a felt-like fuzz. And they're wondering, is this the gall mite they've been hearing about, and will they have to burn the whole lot?
Yeah, it doesn't sound great. If they want to bring me in a cutting of it, it's hard when I don't see a photo to know for sure. So I'd hate them to do that without knowing it's definitely the gall mite. So if they did want to bring me in a cutting, I could have a look at it and identify it for sure before that they get rid of the whole thing. So I'm not going to tell them over the radio to get rid of the hedge if it's not necessary. Would like to see a photo. Even a photo would be good if they wanted to send it in, so we could identify it for them for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely further evidence needed before saying burn the whole lot down.
Yeah, even if it's not necessary.
Yeah, especially that. Okay, we have to leave it there for this week. Judy, thank you as always. We'll chat to you again next Monday. Thanks as ever for joining us.
You're more than welcome. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. That's Judy Beck, the General Manager at Clonroad Garden Centre. If you ever have any gardening questions for Judy, be they on a Monday or just send them in any day during the week, and we'll compile them and put them to her the next time she's on with us. It is 086 1800 964.